Welcome to the Jeremy Mullins podcast, where we take a deep dive into different educational topics to help you optimize your life. I am Jeremy, your host. I am here today with Monte, my partner in crime inside of the First Form app, who is one of our coaches on Team Alpha. How are you this morning?
I am doing well. How about yourself?
Doing good. We on our last podcast together, we were talking about people falling off 4 weeks of the challenge, and you kind of snuck in that question at the end about doing the mountain bike race. So we decided to do a podcast directly on off-road assault Mount Mitchell. And I think this would be good because you're not necessarily a mountain biker, so you can just kind of ask questions, and it allows me to kind of explain the situation, what I think of the race. And eventually I'll have my wife come on the podcast to talk about her experience in it, which her experience was probably a little bit better than mine. She was a little bit faster. She won some hardware. It's a difference, guys. So I want you to understand that when I go do races, I am racing the cutoff.
And Katie's going to win.
Katie's going to win, right? And that's okay. I want people to understand that. Like, that is okay. I truly, believe that endurance events are things that, especially, you know, older individuals can go do, right? It's hobbies. And I think it teaches you a lot about life, right? And, I kind of have this saying I've been pushing, here recently, especially in social media, lift heavy, ride long and far, and make some memories. And, the reason that for me resonates is, not only long term, right? If we look at long term health, having muscle tissue, active muscle tissue is beneficial for the body, preventing disease, having a higher VO2 later in life, is an indicator of living longer without disease, right? So it fits into that model. But for me, I've learned that during my life, I am the happiest, productive when I lift and then ride bikes, right? So I look back at my history of quote hobbies and performance, that is where I am the most happy and most comfortable and most healthy. So that's kind of, what I'm going to be pushing a lot, and doing myself here in the next upcoming years.
Nice. So, funny story. I might not be a mountain bike rider, but Monte means mountain.
That makes sense.
And why I'm 6'8", right?
Yeah. I would hate to see, because Katie's bike is tall. I'd hate to see like how big your bike is.
It would be like a toddler on a big wheel.
Yes, it would look pretty. It would look like something else. So we're going to cover assault on Mount Mitchell today, guys. What it is, my experience with it. I've attempted the race twice, and we'll talk about the history of that. But I also want to say thank you to our sponsors. Start out with GreenUp Wealth, who is not my personal financial planner, planning out estate if something would happen to me. We got that, planned out, but also, helping with retirement, where to put funds, all that good stuff that goes into that. Summit Rejuvenation, which is not only a lot of questions I've been getting about Summit is, hey, Jeremy, I'm younger, or, I don't want to do hormone replacement. Is it just that? No, you can get blood work done with them, for a relatively, I hate to use the term cheap, inexpensive price, where you can get your vitamin D, your B12 levels, some of the things that we as health coaches recommend you look at, you can get that done, right? So if you want to optimize your vitamin D levels, you want to optimize your vitamin B12, you can get that blood work done without doing quote unquote hormone replacement therapy. So you see me posting about getting your blood work done. You can do that without going and doing any of the hormones if you're not at that point in your life that you need those. So I wanted to kind of clear that up. And then our newest sponsor, which is a Kentucky native, as we talked about, homegrown fitness, which is doing equipment. They don't have a ton of selections, which I, to a degree like. I always talk about keep it simple, simple is sexy, right? So if you're looking at a home gym, you need a rack, you need a barbell, you need some bumper plates, you need some dumbbells, you need some kettlebells. Like, that's about all you need. And they've got those items. So take a look at them, see if there's anything that you do like on there. And I would ask you, if you're looking at equipment, give them a chance. So all that homework out of the way. Now let's talk about this race.
Let's talk about the race. So, as you mentioned earlier, you've done the race a couple times. What was your experience like the first time? How'd it go?
Yeah. So and I think, I don't know if we ever talked about history here. So, I played sports in high school, was decent for high school sports. Went to college and then got into really then that's when I started working out. Like fitness becomes something that, okay, there's a business in fitness and really enjoyed working out and kind of got into mountain biking as my introduction to triathlons. So got into mountain biking and then from mountain biking, and this is just great being young and motivated. Like, well, if we're going to get into triathlons, we might as well do an Ironman, right? Like that was the philosophy, back in 2003. So got into mountain biking, got into triathlons, Ironman, did all that. Kind of then got into the CrossFit era, got out of riding bikes, and then we started getting back into bike riding, and especially mountain bikes, getting off the road, just getting on the trails. Because unfortunately, and it's even worse today than it was 8-9 years ago. Like a lot of people unfortunately are on their phones, right? So I enjoy the trail riding, the gravel riding, mountain biking on trails, not necessarily the downhill. I want to throw that out there because I think that's important. So it was 8 years ago. We got into it. We picked one of the hardest races on the East Coast. It's Assault on Mount Mitchell in North Carolina. So if you're Mount Mitchell is the tallest. I think it's the tallest point on the East Coast. I think I'm going to fact check that so I don't get up. It is the highest peak in the Appalachian Mountains. There we go. Highest peak, mainland, North America, east of the Mississippi. That's Wikipedia, not memorization. So decided to do Assault on Mount Mitchell. Showed up on a hardtail Haro, probably a $300, $400, mountain bike, and was in decent shape. I'd been riding a lot. We were training for an Ironman this year. So a lot of times inside of endurance sports, or endurance training, you call it, okay, my A race is this. It's the most important race of the year. Sometimes those are big races. Sometimes it's a local race, right? Because your local race might be your A race because that's when all the people that are there, right? So sometimes you have these races that you'll do leading up to it that aren't as important, or you're like, hey, this is a training race. So to a degree, this was a B race versus the A race was the Ironman that year. Got there, and let me tell you, man, this is one of the hardest races I think people would do on a mountain bike in the world, right? As far as a one-day race, 60 plus miles, depending on the year, anywhere between 9,000 and 11,000 feet of total climbing over the course of those 60 miles.
That's a beast.
It is a lot. And back in, I think it was 8 years ago, 9 years ago that we did the first time. Once again, just we always say you learn from your mistakes. Start out hot. You think you can race it. You get caught up in the situation. Went hard for the first like 20, 30 miles and did okay. Wrecked a couple of times on the downhill. The downhill in this race is very technical. So it's not a race I would encourage someone who has not been mountain biking, to do. You want to have some experience of riding single track, especially downhill, to go do it. And I remember, being like, man, I can't, this is tough, right? Like I am not used to riding this downhill, this single track. And I got to 30 miles in, which is roughly halfway in when you start the big climb. And the big climb is literally 6 miles up what's called Curtis Creek Climb. It's a dirt road where it just climbs to the top of the Blue Ridge Parkway. It was hot that year. There was like people off their bikes cramping, had to walk a bunch of this just to finish like the climb. Make it to the top of the climb, meet up with one of my buddies, and from there you think it's over, right? Because you climb to the top of the Blue Ridge Parkway, but then you have another 2 miles of climbing to do on the Blue Ridge Parkway to get to the top of the quote unquote race, to then dive down what is called Black Diamond single track.
Your favorite, the downhill.
My favorite. I'd already wrecked twice on the day. And this is the reason we kind of went back in the race, to make it long story shorter. We decided, me and my buddy, we rode to the main top, to the top of the single track. And I was like, hey, if we ride back off, do we still get our miles in for the day? I was like, because I really don't want to risk like wrecking again, getting hurt. I'm on this hardtail $300 bike at the time. And he's like, man, I've heard this single track is very gnarly. And we made a decision to ride back off. And, so with that, of course, DNF in the race, it was the first time that I didn't finish a race that I'd done in my life. And the reason I'm saying this is I still think it was a smart decision, but it also affected me mentally, right? Because not finishing the race, nothing negative happened. Like my buddies, yeah, they give you a little bit of jabs or not finishing or stuff like that, but nothing negative happened in my life, right? And what I saw after that, when I would go do events and things would get really hard or training, it always like creeped in as you could slow down, Jeremy. You could quit. Nothing negative is going to happen, right? And we see this a lot, Monte, in like wellness in journeys. People start their fitness journey, they quit, and immediately they don't see anything negative, right? It's not like they, have a heart attack, get a high cholesterol reading or something like that right when they quit, right? It's down the road that unfortunately those negative things come into play.
Correct.
You know,
So no, go ahead.
and I was just, that's the big point that I want people to get across is like that affected me mentally. Right now, I still went out that year to even put some more stuff on. Still went that year, finished the Ironman distance event later on that fall. Had success, but I can tell you it affected me up until this past summer. Right, it affected me, and that's the reason I chose to go back and do this race. Because there's 2 events that I haven't finished, and I'm like, I'm going to finish these races because
That was,
mentally,
yeah,
I want to get back to the point where I take quitting off the table unless it has something to do with me getting hurt right there, right? Truly like death. And I've got some of these things, listed out like you're not going to quit unless X, Y, or Z. And that was the reason I chose to go back and do the event.
that was my next question. What made you go back and choose to do it again after that first time? Because they
Yeah, I
can't
mean
beat you up
that's the whole
forever
reason. Yeah,
when you don't
like I
finish
said,
something like that.
talk about like it's a blessing in disguise, with the injury to my bicep this spring, right? Because it got me back on the bike. And once I got back on the bike, these are the decisions I made. Okay, you're back riding. You're gonna, you're enjoying this. Go do these things that you haven't finished, right? And that was the reason we went back and chose to do it. And it was like, okay, going to go back, going to, take a little bit better downhill bike, not a hardtail, and going to finish that and check it off the list. And it felt good this time around. Had a game plan of not going out super hard, going out and riding heart rate, staying, within a good pace. Um, didn't walk the climb, didn't have to walk the bike on any of the climbing this time. Had to walk, a little bit on like the steep single tracks and the downhill that I talked about. That was just treacherous. I didn't want to ride, which a lot of people, do walk it. Um, and finished, ride time, I think on my Strava was 9 hours, just 9 hours and 20 minutes, but that doesn't include your stop time at your rest and stuff. So I think clock time was just over 10 hours. And it felt good, like to earn that back and kind of callous, that over mentally that, okay, hey, you can go finish hard things and to be able to check that back off is something that I feel good about. And it's built confidence in me that it's not only going to help me inside of doing quote mountain bike races or these races, but just in life in general, whether that be, getting up early, answering messages, staying up late, answering messages, getting back to people, whatever the case may be, when you build that confidence in yourself, it matters a lot.
Now, I didn't want to know, like, so leading up to that event, going back and finish it, and we relate stuff to a lot of people's health journeys. When you have that quote unquote failure, or you don't finish something, and then you kind of go back the other way, and then you're going leading back up to it. Was there any mental hurdles that you had to overcome coming up to that second race? Like, did it creep in your mind like the first time you didn't finish it? Are you going to get it out there and finish this time?
No, I mean, like deep down, I knew I could finish it, right? Like I truly did. Like I could have finished it 8 years ago. But I think it was confidence on the bike, going downhill. Um, and then once again, it's just, getting back to where, mentally being strong and knowing that, you're going to be uncomfortable. Right. And that's what I love about doing the longer bike races is you're not going to feel 100% during the entire time. You're going to hit points where you don't feel good and you got to push through and know that you have more physically inside of that event. Um, was there a little bit of anxiety? Of course, because there's always a chance of like, what if you don't, finish, or what
Right.
if you don't, fall within the, time cut. Um, but it was something I'll always remember because it got, once again, some buddies, back in the bike, guys back in together. We're planning to do other events and they've struggled with things in their wellness too, whether that be overcoming alcohol, whether that be, overcoming, one of my friends, has a learning disabilities to overcome and have really good success in the realty world, but got out of bike riding. So got some of my buddies back into bike riding, doing events together. But for me personally, I was able to, check the box and finish that race that to a degree had been haunting me, right? Had allowed me not to be the best me, right? Because it did let that little voice creep in that, hey, Jeremy, you can quit, right? No matter what it is, right? You can quit when things get hard and nothing negative is going to happen.
And you
Maybe.
pretty much touched on it. The last thing I really had was the what you gained from it. And you've kind of talked about how you gained that confidence back and it pretty much trained your brain like, hey, you can either quit when things get hard or you went back, faced it head on, and gained that power back over those voices in your head telling you that. So, which is very, very powerful.
And I think that's why, my last, point to this and when we talk about like, without going into details of the race and the single track and we're at mile markers, and we'll do that when we have my wife on, but like the biggest thing I want people to understand is that's why I think as adults, it's so easy to quit, right? Because you think about it as a kid, you went out for whatever sport and your parents are like, you're not going to quit. Like you didn't quit things, right? And then as adults, though, I think what happens is you quit and you do not see anything negative out of it. And then it allows you, once again, it just becomes easier to do, and you never get it back, right? Anytime something gets hard, people quit,
Nothing's
right?
going to happen if I quit.
100%. And we see that in the wellness journey. We see that's why, unfortunately, people don't have long term success because as soon as it gets hard, they quit. And then once again, they don't see anything negative out of it. You eat the cheeseburger and the fries at the fast food, you don't see anything negative out of it right away. But eventually it catches up with you, right? So to those listeners out there, and once again, this doesn't have to be an endurance event, okay? But if you failed at life in whatever, I would encourage you, no matter your age, go back. Maybe it's go back to school, right? Maybe it's finish an event. Maybe it's to get back on your wellness journey and lose that 100 pounds, that you need to lose. But go back, right? Build some wins. Take quitting off the table. Okay. Now, once again, inside of a endurance event, I have certain things that, hey, if I'm peeing blood, it's okay to quit, right? Like there's certain things that I've, got
You
like,
thought about it.
yeah, like there's certain things that, okay, Jeremy, it's okay to not finish a race if you're peeing blood or a couple of different other things that's on there. But other than that, you're not quitting. Lose a toenail? Ooh, suck it up, buddy. So bleeding, suck it up, right? Peeing blood, okay, it's okay to quit on that one, right? Like so that I think is something that people can do to improve their life.
100% agree. Finish what you started, regardless.
There we go. Even if it takes you 8 years to go back and finish what you started, guys, make it happen. It will free that little voice. That little voice will not be there. Be a little bit more quieter now from that standpoint. So appreciate you guys listening. If you need anything from us, send us an email here at the Jeremy Mullins or JM podcast. We'll get to you guys. Or if you need Monte and I, reach out on social media. Hope you guys have a wonderful day.
Thanks for having me, Jeremy.